When you're scaling a brand across continents, the playbook needs to be more than just having a good product or service. It needs innovation, agility, and a model built to last. Now, in this episode, we're going to explore what it really takes to grow a business and a brand that thrives in any market. So if you're into building something big, you're going to want to pay attention to this one.
Welcome to Fordify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
Joining me today is Troy Hooper. He's the CEO of Hot Pallet America, the powerhouse behind Pepper Lunch's North American expansion. And he's also the host of the Pineapple Perspective podcast. I'm so glad he's taken time for Fordify Live today. Troy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ford. Glad to be here.
Well, tell our listeners that may not be familiar with you and your brand, what is it that you're doing right now? And then we'll go back about some growth strategies.
Yeah, I mean, we are expanding the North American footprint now while we explore the development of even more new countries. We expect to announce 2 to 3 new countries by the end of the year as far as being on the development track or new deals being available and being signed in. But in the U.S., we've already added 85 new stores to the pipeline,
Wow.
which will open in the next couple of years. So just growth, build internal infrastructure and team and support and systems, and then help those franchisees get open and optimize their operations and do a great job at executing this phenomenal brand.
So you've got a great brand. You're obviously taking care of your franchises. You've reached that magic big number of over 500 units, which is huge. Most don't even get to, some don't get to 25, then 100, and then now you're at that 500 and scaling above that. Now, if you've tuned in late, we're talking with Troy Hooper. You can find him out at pepperlunchrestaurants.com. So pepperlunchrestaurants.com. Obviously, you can check him out on LinkedIn and share this episode. But we're live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and a few other places. And the audio from this becomes the Business Growth Show podcast. So while we're talking to a CEO of a franchise brand, please keep in mind, we've got listeners that are franchisees, franchisors, entrepreneurs, private equity groups. This is about business growth. Now, how did you come to be in this role of a CEO, guiding the direction of this growth?
I did a podcast, Ford. It's pretty synergistic to this conversation. In February 2022, I did a podcast. I was seen or heard around April by a gentleman who was running about a 13-unit restaurant group and had made an investment in a bagel concept. And they were looking to bring in an alternative investor or hire a consultant to help them market for growth investment of that. They reached out to me. I have a company called Kiwi Restaurant Partners. We help brands scale at speed while improving their quality with an outsourced C-suite. And I was found or known through that. Got to know this gentleman over a few months. Coincidentally, his name is Stephen Hooper, not related as far as we could figure out. And in September of that year, he got an email from a former classmate of his in business school at Dartmouth who said, "Hey, I've just become the CEO of this holding company in Japan. We have this brand we're buying, and we need help. We need help on the executive level. We need help in the United States and Canada. We need help on the global scale. Who do you know?" And he says, "Let me introduce you to this guy, Troy Hooper." 2 days later, I'm in the Sheraton LAX hotel lobby meeting my boss, Yuto Tago. And about 90 minutes after we met, it was settled that I would be joining the company and bringing along my Kiwi Restaurant Partners team as the outsourced infrastructure initially, which about a year later, we started onboarding them onto the company directly. But the short answer is I did a podcast.
It's so interesting because people always ask me about this show, and I've done over 500 episodes, and I have 2 types of people on this show. I have CEOs of brands that I want to build a relationship with, share great value, and then obviously I'm a keynote speaker for franchise brands, right? So it makes sense. Deals don't happen before dialogue. You're not going to bring me in to be an opening keynote speaker for your brand if you hadn't have an opportunity to work with me. So, for example, I had the CEO of Tropical Smoothie on, and when I got done, he's like, we should bring you in for our annual conference. I'm like, yeah, that would be a really good idea. So
that's how this works.
Yeah. So the takeaway, everybody, isn't about being self-promotion. It's about adding value, right? So if you add
Right.
value, it opens up opportunities, but deals do not happen before dialogue. So whatever you're selling, it doesn't matter whether you're a retail or wholesale or what your channel of distribution is or what your role is. Communication is so important, building strong relationships, meeting new people, just like me meeting Troy in the green room prior to this episode, and then being able to learn more about what he's doing. And now he's taking his whole team. And so he had it's the old adage that, prepare for an opportunity before you have one, or like Harvard McKay, dig your well before you're thirsty. So what are some of the things that you had to overcome as you slipped into that role of a CEO from a pre-existing company? Hypothetically, of course, that you can share.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I'm extremely transparent. Look, we inherited a badly done FDD and no business infrastructure. So we built this company from the ground up as far as the North American division. We inherited an existing couple of licensees that had different business arrangements with the brand prior to acquisition. But we, and then on a global scale, the brand was completely disconnected. We actually bought our first and largest master franchisee back the day I started. They closed that deal. And so really we've been on this trajectory of putting the brand back together on a global scale, reunifying, solidifying the global leadership and down the line. Look, we own 126 corporate stores. We have over 1,000 employees on the operations side. And, on the US side, we've been building systems and processes and then exporting what's applicable. On a global scale, we've adopted the US system for franchise sales globally now. This is the model. This is the documentation. This is the business model that we use here is now the standard for what we use globally. And true for the tech stack, we've been exporting the tech stack little by little as we've developed its usefulness and value here. So, and those kinds of things go on and vice versa, right? The other learnings are this had been going for 30 years before I got here.
Right.
And there's a lot of pride and a lot of brand ownership among the team. There's a lot of folks that have been with us 15 to 25 years as a brand. And so learning from them, all of the things that make this brand special, all of the things that they've tried and not worked, tried and do work, and the reason why certain things are done certain ways. And then just, again, the mutual understanding that altogether we build a better thing. And so some of the ideas we've taken and adapted, and they've really appreciated that in other markets in the world and vice versa. There's many things we've taken from them that are sort of written in stone. We're not going to mess with them. They're good. They've been tried. They've been true. They've been tested over 30 years. So it's been a lot of fun learning, both culturally, concept-wise, food genre-wise, and then there's a lot of capability over there that I've had the ability to upskill from.
That sounds amazing. I know that for me, when I started in franchising about 34 years ago, and I worked in a lot of home services businesses, a lot of service business, and then I got brought in for QSR, quick serve restaurants, fast casual, full service dining. I didn't know what those terms were 30 years ago. I was like, okay, I don't understand. What is QSR? Okay, fast food, but don't call it that, right? And
right.
So I had to learn along the way, and so I had an opportunity to be with a lot of the brands, and a lot of times as a franchise consultant, I'm brought in strategically to help them grow their brand. So like I worked with Dine Brands, which are IHOP, Fuzzy's Tacos, and I can't remember the third, Applebee's. So I help them with their business development. Sometimes I work with their franchisees. So I've got a chance to sit behind the scenes and see what works and what doesn't. And so with your role, you've got way more experience in the restaurant world than I'll ever have. What are some of the biggest challenges that restaurant brands face when expanding into new markets, let alone the United States, but globally? Like there's got to be, I would just think that would be super challenging to get market share.
Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, the first one is being ready, and that's having supply chain, right? Being able to support those stores, knowing that you have a team that's capable of supporting those stores at the hyper-local level, as they're looking for sites, as they're going through construction, as they're planning to train and pre-open. All of those things require sort of partnership and hand-holding or unified sort of trajectory on both sides of the brand and the franchisee's part. But getting supply chain established, look, you can't open a brand like this that has a ton of proprietary products, proprietary spec and source products, and very ethnically specific sauces and things like that have to get to the store. So we have to establish that supply chain. That, for a brand like ours, is the hardest because you have to convince distributors and manufacturers and things that we're worth investing in, right? We need you to support one store as if there's 50 stores, right? So I know we only have one in Tampa, but we're going to build 2 more this year. So we'll have 3 in Tampa by the end of the first year. So in 1 year, we'll have built 3 and opened them. So, get on that ride with a supplier or vendor or distributor or service provider, et cetera. That's the hardest part. And the benefit that we're able to bring with my experience and my team's experience is we've done this many times before. So we have a track record that these vendors can look back on and say, when they said they were going to do this, they did it and it was worth it. And we're still with those brands and it made sense. So it's really about building trust and authority and partnership at every level in the business. But then it's finding those franchisees. And look, I would never advise, as you probably would never advise a brand to be based in Los Angeles, California, and one of your first new stores is in St. Petersburg, Florida. Right. And we're about to build one in Dallas, and we're about to build one in Portland, Oregon. That's not the way you would normally do it, but we're well resourced. We actually have visibility on our scale. So our franchisees are opening 5 stores in 3 or 10 stores in 6 years. And so really we're able to make that investment up front. Most brands, emerging brands particularly, are not capable, or nor should they be investing in that kind of growth model. But we're a national growth, international, multi-country growth model right now. And we're making those investments to support that system up front, knowing that the long term is this very large scale. Look, we have 540 stores today. When I started, we had 369 stores 2.5 years ago. And we plan to more than double our 500 store count in about 5 to 7 years. So it's a different way of doing it. It's a different model. And it's good for certain brands to maybe look at the way we've done it. But for most emerging or smaller growth brands or slower growth brands, concentric is the way to go. Start from your home base and work your way out so that people know who you are and your resources are centralized, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And because we've got regular entrepreneurs and all kinds of businesses who listen to this. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs as a strategic consultant with these brands. And I always tell them, make sure you have a really clear message. Make sure you're targeting your ideal client profile or different clients, know who the influence and decision maker is, and then know what your methods are. And it's really that combination of having a great clarity of message and value, going to the real people that are your target influencers and decision makers, and then what action steps are you going to take to reach them? And I've had 17 different companies, 3 were 8 figures. I've never gone bankrupt, but I have let a few projects go. And I've learned along the way that there's no such thing as a money problem. If you want to make more money, add more value, focus on creating great customer experiences, and the value will come. And obviously there's more. I don't want to oversimplify it for people. And, it's just that simple. Some things are easy to understand and harder to implement. Just like you're saying, hey, we systematized, we have supply chains, we've got systems in place. And I think that that's the real big, when people ask me and they know I'm involved in franchising in the franchising world, and I speak to insurance, automotive, pharmaceutical, I'm speaking outside of it, franchising, but I do so much in franchising because they're entrepreneurs and I'm an entrepreneur and I understand local marketing. So I'm usually brought in for local marketing or leveraging AI because there's so much disinformation and confusion around what it is and should they use it and how it's going to replace things. But it really comes down to creating what I love about franchising is that when you invest in that system and you're coachable and you're accountable and you follow the system that your franchise brand delivers and you look for ways to follow as opposed to reinventing the wheel, you scale so much quicker and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I always get surprised when I go to a conference and a franchisee will raise a question and they want to change the system or, they want to add a different menu item or there's so many different examples I could share with you. And I would just say, look, follow your systems first. And a lot of them will complain that they'll use their excuse. Well, you don't know my market. You don't know my territory. But then I can point to 7 other people in the room that have the exact same demographic, market, and challenges, and they're top producers, right? So it starts at home, I think, first. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, definitely you need to establish, look, we're really very strong with our mandated systems. There's not any room for discussion on what we know works. But at the same time, we are open-minded to at least receive and hear and look into and anything that's suggested. Obviously, we have to have discipline. I think you have to be strategic. To your point, it may be a great idea, and it may not be a no, but it may be a not now, right? It may just not. We want to execute with excellence, right? And so if we got a great idea, but we can't execute it flawlessly or with great thoroughness and some long consideration that brings all of the stakeholders to the table to discuss it, then we're just shooting from the hip, and those are usually the things that will fail, fall flat, or worst case scenario, actually harm the brand. And so we have to be a little more thoughtful. But an example is our franchisee in Utah, a few months ago, brought us some ideas around a kids menu, and we've been thinking about what does Pepper Lunch need to do to be more obvious about what a kid's item would be, because our customers who know the brand are really good at sort of making it work, finding the dishes that make sense for their children. And it's not hard to figure that out, but it's not overtly created specifically for the kids. So now we're creating the whole one side is a menu, one side is a playground of coloring and games and information that all ties back to the brand. And that wasn't high on our priority list necessarily. It was on our roadmap and the thing we wanted to do. But he just brought the solution. He says, well, what if we did these 3 dishes at this price point, at this portion, and all you would have to do is write like a very short, simple manual to sort of outline. We have all these ingredients. There's nothing new. There's nothing different. Yes, we have to program the KDS and program the kiosk and all that stuff, but it's not as big of a lift. So, what is an idea from him that took him a few days or a week to come up with might take us 3 months to implement, but he definitely moved it up the needle for us because of the feedback of his customer and because he did some of the legwork for us. So we love that. If a franchisee comes to you and has done real background, real research, tested the idea internally with friends, family, employees, whatever, hopefully not your customers, right. but brings you a kind of a packaged up solution, you got to look at it. I mean, I think was it the Big Mac? Or I think the Big Mac is an example, and maybe the McFlurry too. But there's lots of examples of great collaborations between franchisor and franchisee. But to your point, don't do it on your own. Don't go rogue, please. And and be thoughtful and be understanding that look, the brand has a limited capacity to implement new concepts, new ideas, new menu items. And there's more to it. There's QA, QC, there's supply chain, there's wanting to roll this out across, umpteen stores, not just your store or just your stores in your region. So be patient and work with your franchisor in that respect.
Yeah. And all the brands I've worked with, they all have some type of feedback system, whether it's a franchise advisory council or their monthly training calls where people can bring their ideas forward. So it's really great that you've got a brand that listens, but also isn't just that's conditioned because of your experience, of course, that you're not just going to shift every time the wind blows, right? It's, I've talked to so many people where they say, I've talked to everybody and they all want, and they use this wide brush, right? And I say, well, who's everybody and who's all? And then you narrow it down, it's like 3 people, right? And it's like, okay, so I appreciate the idea, but all ideas are good. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned in all the businesses and brands I've worked with, the more I know, the more I don't know. Now, I'm obviously very skilled and I've got a lot of insights, but as a true marketer, I test, I track what the results are, I modify one thing and I test again, and I'm resistant and I, help other brands be resistant to just changing for the sake of change because, causation isn't correlation or correlation isn't causation or whatever. Those are 2 big words for me, but it has to be with, just because it happened with this doesn't mean that it means this.
100%. Absolutely. You said it very well.
So what leadership qualities are essential for running a successful business or hospitality business? What do you feel are some, must-haves that need to be part of someone's makeup?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost for me, it's empathy. You have to put yourself in the shoes of every person. Actually, somebody today, I think on LinkedIn or something, put out a similar kind of question and said, what if you were to mentor somebody 20 years younger and what they need to do to get to where you are, I said, do every job in the business, right? I was a busser and then an expo and then a server and a bartender and a kitchen manager. And, you be infinitely curious, but have empathy. And my point is that when folks get to this level of a role, don't forget where you came from. Most of us in this role started as a busboy or a host or on the kitchen line or something like that. Dishwasher, very common among the men, but not all. But it's easy to forget where you come from, and at all layers and all levels. Like, think about the stress and what you're putting on your store level managers or your regional managers, right? Do you have so much paperwork and process and admin work? Is that all really actually necessary? Can that be consolidated and reduce some of that workload, after hours, so to speak, workload when they're not where they need to be, which is on the store with your people. So I think empathy is one. Curiosity is another. I lean heavily into humility. I'm a big, boisterous, loud, opinionated guy. My entire career, I might come across in a lot of ways as cocky or a little overconfident.
I am too. I think you're describing me, but keep going.
Yeah. So I learned, thankfully, through Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. When I was 26 years old, I started trying to remember what it means to have some humility. And for me, I just have to remind myself regularly to seek first to understand, then be understood. Don't walk into a room or conversation or even answer a question that's posed to me as the leader. Don't answer that question immediately with my one-way, one-sided, one-minded answer, right? I have, like you said earlier, Ford, I have my perspective, my experience, and my knowledge, but I don't know what I don't know until somebody tells me otherwise. And so for me, I always want to try to remember to ask questions first. And so walk into a room, walk into a conversation, or if I'm posed with an important question, turn that into a series of questions so I can learn. How does this affect you? What are the challenges you're facing? How is this going to affect your employees downstream? How is this going to affect our customers? I do have a phenomenal mentor, Joe Gatto, who reminded me regularly in my career that you have to balance the needs of your customer, your employee, and the financials of the business, right? The business itself. So balance them. Not any one of them should be so far out of balance. It doesn't have to be win, 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 or yes, yes, yes to all 3 of those all the time, but there has to be balance. And if you're going to overweight something towards a customer, you have to really think about the effect on the employee. And if you're going to overweight something based on a financial performance metric, you really need to think about how that affects the other 2 stakeholders in that equation. So those are my wise words of the day, I guess.
Well, no, they're extremely wise. I always tell people 3 things: happy bank account, happy clients, happy team. Right. So, exactly. I mean, I just try to,
much shorter, better, clearer way.
It's the exact same thing, exactly, just differently. Right. And so I totally agree. And I think to me, it's, I share with people, if you're asking the wrong question, the answer doesn't matter. But if you're listening to the way you phrase those questions, and for those of you listening, go back and listen to this episode again more than once, because there's some gems in what he's saying for any business or any business leader, regardless of what your staff is. It's really asking the right questions. And, it's like me. So someone will call my office and say, well, what's your keynote fee? Now, if I say 25 grand, they're going to hang up the phone. Like the next call, I don't care who they think I am. I'm not a celebrity speaker, although I'm in certain realms. I'm the expert who's in the Hall of Fame. And so I always tell them, look, if you're making the decision based on price, I'm probably not the right speaker. You can always find someone cheaper. You'll even find people who will pay to come in and speak, but they're either going to put them into a PowerPoint coma or they're going to do an infomercial. So, I'm not that right one. Go check me out and then come back. And so I've learned not to just, here's how I can do it. I'm really more selective because I want to make sure it's a good fit for them. But that's the same for any business, any brand, any customer. And I truly believe there's no shortage of money. I think that now I've had cash flow issues. I've had companies where I had to make payroll on Monday. Like I want to be very clear here, everybody. I've had the real stuff that people have to do in their business, but I've also had the mindset. And so to me, I found that the growth, Troy, in any business, whatever the gap is, always comes down to mindset, strategy, or tactics. They have to have their mindset dialed in first, because if they don't have their mindset dialed in, strategy and tactics and systems won't work. Then in a franchise brand, follow those systems. Like really lean in and ask yourself, what is it that's mentally stopping you from doing the system? A lot of people will give you the reason why it won't work, but they haven't tried it, right? So follow the system. And then tactically, what are your actions? What are the highest misuse of your time? Hire your weaknesses, focus on being accountable, proactive, coachable, have a success library, make sure that you're controlling your attitude, your actions, and your allocation of time. And once people start practicing that, and I say that as I'm saying it to you, just like I'm saying it to me in the mirror, because, my business growth, I have a digital marketing agency for done for you services because I speak on marketing. So a lot of times they'll say, well, can you just help us with these campaigns? So we do all types of graphic and video and automated marketing automation. But then when it's the speaking side, they always say, well, what's your topic? And I'm like, it's business growth. That's the reason. But underneath that, there's sales, there's marketing, there's lead generation, referral marketing, online, there's all these other modalities. But I always tell them, don't get seduced by those things. Focus on what is it you're trying to do. And usually the brands either want accelerated growth. They want their franchisees to take care of the local market and really be heroes in their local market, because you've got the corporate voice, but then you've got the local market, especially for a restaurant, right? And then on the other side of it, it's, what can you delegate or delete or just do yourself, right? So you should be doing the highest and best use. But are there any systems or processes that you learned along the way that kind of shocked you, that now are part of your whole makeup?
Yeah, look, I think you've got to have a really clear line of action steps towards those strategies. So again, back to the 7 habits, coincidentally, whether you call them the boulders and the rocks and the pebbles, right. Or you have any other, you've got to chip away at everything every day. So, getting caught up in the whirlwind, getting caught up as a firefighter putting out fires is definitely not the highest use and best use of your time. Build systems every time there's a fire. Build a prevention system to keep that from coming back, right? It's sort of the repetitive issues that you never solve that are really sort of the hamster wheel that you never get off of. So, for me, it's really about what has to get done now or this week. What can I work on this week that solves for the thing 3 months from now? And what are we working on now? And at Pepper Lunch, we're always looking at 6 months, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. So we are actually always have that, and it's a rolling plan, right? So every 3 to 6 months, we are evaluating the next 6 months, year, 3 year, and 5 year period. And we're asking ourselves, where are we against all those goals? And not only in store count or average ticket or average customer count and all those kinds of things, average unit volume, but many other, measurables right along the way. And otherwise, if you don't have clear line of sight and measurability, you have no idea where you are or where you're going. It's pretty clear. You got to have a map and you got to know, if you got enough gas in the tank to get to the next way station, so to speak. And so we're always checking in with that. And that's really the strategic leadership. It's my job to keep everybody focused. We just did this. We just had a refocus over the last 3 weeks where I asked my team, tell me the top 10 things you're working on, and then prioritize them specifically on those projects, campaigns, or checklists. And then I let them tell me what those were. And then I let it go for a week. And then we came back 2 weeks later and I said, great, now that you look back on that, what's the most important thing that you do every day? What's the most important goal of yours every day? What is Hot Pallet, the holding company of Pepper Lunch? What is our job every day? And we have to remind ourselves and remind each other that our customer, the franchise operator, our franchisee, is our number one priority. If we do everything with a focus on making sure they have the tools, resources, knowledge, experience, and support from us that they need, everything else falls in place. Like chasing new store sales, franchisee sales, they'll come to us because our franchisees will be so happy they'll tell everybody they know, right? Focusing on how many plates we sold today in a given store, the customers will come because we're doing a great job of delivering marketing assets and materials and campaigns, LTOs, new products, menu re-engineering, whatever those things are, right? So, and on goes the thought process across all departments and all touch points. So we have to always step back, take a pill, swallow a pride pill sometimes, and reevaluate what we're working on and what we're focused on, and make sure that we're focused on the right things for the right reasons. And then we stay strategically laser focused on the path to get where we're trying to go as a team.
Yeah, I've always used, whenever it comes to any type of metrics or key performance indicators, I use an MTNO method. So when I work with my team or my brands, what's the minimum, target, and optimal? So whatever metric it is, I always want them to have an MTNO so that way they can self-regulate themselves, whether it's in sales or marketing or lead generation or the net promoter score or whatever it is. what's your minimum, what's your target, and what's your optimal. That way they have some type of measurement instead of just, okay, here's your target, here's your goal. Can we add an MTNO, whether it's in top line revenue, system-wide sales, conversions, foot traffic, average ticket, whatever it is, what's the minimum, target, and optimal? All right, so I'm going to shift the gears, but we've got a couple more minutes here. So with the rise of technology, especially in the restaurant operations and guest expectations, what are some things that you can share where technology is helping? And before you do, here's the reason I'm asking this. I'm doing a lot of speaking on AI right now, and obviously it's the real authentic ways to use it. I mean, you can't open up your email without seeing 17 webinars on AI masterclasses. So I'm one of those 17 people that are emailing people, but mine I always look through the eyes of influence, lead generation, customer experience, or operations. So when you look at technology, I know a lot of times, when the minimum wage went up in California, you saw all the kiosks and all the robotics. What do you see on the landscape, not only for Pepper Lunch restaurants, but just in general for the restaurant in operations?
Well, I'll leave the AI, which is the sexy, fun, interesting thing, as my punchline, because we're pretty darn deep in AI. To use your example, I would definitely have said kiosks to start with. I was skeptical about kiosks for many years. I've been watching how people implement them. I've been using them as a consumer with the lens of how would I use this if I was an operator or brand. But when we decided to do it, we planned it for over a year. We picked the right partner, we designed the right interface, and we made some really important decisions. And the first decision was we were going to eliminate the cashier role and rehire, not retrain necessarily that person, but rehire or re-find within our organizations the right person to be what we call a hospitality host. You might consider it a greeter plus an ambassador. This is somebody who welcomes you, segments our customer into been here before, never been here before, sort of segmentation, and then gives sort of a different conversation to each one of them about introducing them to our brand or introducing them to new parts of our brand if they've been customers before. And that interaction has overnight changed several metrics within our business. The one our franchisees really enjoy is that our average ticket, our average basket went up over $5 instantly and sustainable since. Our average plate went up about $1.68. So more items on the plate, more items in the basket or on the ticket. That was phenomenal. But my favorite thing, which we've just sort of surfaced in some internal capabilities of data parsing, is that we're considered a much more friendly brand. Friendliness is the number one mentioned, or hospitality is the number one mentioned metric in all reviews aggregated over the last 4 months. So we just became a more approachable, more friendly, more connected, more brand affinity building entity, but we also drove business results. And what's going to happen is the average basket and average ticket are going to stay up or continue to climb, but the repeat guest is going to increase because that sentiment of friendliness, hospitality, welcoming, et cetera. So that's one where technology can be deployed with hospitality to get business results across the board. Talk about AI. We've been on AI. When my first hire, when I got the job, my very first hire, after outsourcing to my consulting company to get some team on hand, my first hire at Hot Pallet was actually a technologist, specializes in UX, UI, and creative through the forms of technology. And since May of 2022, he's been working on AI for our brand. And what did that look like in May of 22 and what that looked like this morning when we had a call are light years from each other. But I can tell you that for about 14 months now, not a piece of copy has been written by a human at Pepper Lunch that has gone out in any format, except for my personal LinkedIn. My personal LinkedIn, I write all the copy. Kind of a Gary V lesson in that way, but no, the brand has been. We've been building a brand specific GPT on 2 different platforms since May of 2022, and we leverage that every day to write all kinds of things from a creative or operational or communication standpoint in any way. We've now started adding images and videos and graphics and stuff. And so we have this character that not a lot of people in the US have become aware of yet, but the mascot of the brand was redesigned about a year and a half ago, named Peppy. And he's this cute little just chef, iteration of a character for us. And we probably have about 180 or so individual graphics of Pepe doing different activities and in different positions and things. Well, my guys just over the weekend took those 200 images of Pepe and put them through the right machines and right systems. And now we have 2D and 3D animation of Pepe doing all kinds of fun activities overnight, right? Another one for us in AI, again, with this video and photo capability, is feeding it pictures of our dishes inside of our restaurants, getting the background and the dishes and the implementation. We use specific plates and utensils and things like that. We fed it a lot of imagery around that, showed it a bunch of models, shoots that we had done, some lifestyle, shoots with different demographics of young people and things. We fed that into a machine. And today they've already created over 200 images and soon to be videos of AI models, essentially replacing the need for that photo shoot. Right. So if we give it enough examples and we give it a good enough prompt, through the right 2 or 3 engines stacked on top of each other, we're getting very expensive looking, very high quality model, led imagery already in just over the weekend. So it's extremely disruptive. And I don't look at it Ford as a replacement of everything and everybody. It is, we need volume. We need to be able to say a lot of things in a lot of places all the time. And so we've always leveraged and we continue to leverage it for improving our messaging and our quality and scaling the reachability of our messages, whether it's B2B on the franchise side or B2C on the consumer side as a brand globally, nationally, and then of course down to the local hyper-local market execution. And so that was my first mandate today was, this is great. This is amazing for the brand. I love it for all the things we can use it for here at the brand, but please start immediately hyper-localizing. Let's get people that look like people from that region. Let's get different ages and let's get different messages put together so that we can reduce the cost and reduce the time and reduce the slug related to our local franchisees creating their own marketing or utilizing national marketing and repurposing it. So a lot going on in the AI space and it's moving outrageously fast.
Yeah, I always tell people, map out your customer journey and look for where it's appropriate to use AI. And I want to anchor a couple things that you said as we wrap up here. One of the reasons that your kiosk situation, your automation is working is because you added that host. And there's been some studies on this. I won't name them for this, but there were a lot of studies that were found, and that if a person using a kiosk could see a person, the sales went up. But if they did it where they couldn't see a peer or there wasn't a host, it dropped. So it's good to hear you real time with a big brand. I always, whenever I'm speaking on AI, I like to be able to have some sources to be able to say, well, in Pepper Lunch, here's what they're doing. And I don't want not to give away anything that's a secret. You can walk into one of the restaurants.
That's all public knowledge now. So.
But I think it's really important is because you still have that human touch, right? And on the second side of it is, I think that when it comes to using AI, I tell people AI is a feature, not a product. It's not a replacement. It's an enhancement. And that the greatest fear with AI isn't adopting it too soon. It's waiting too long and falling behind. You can't wait for it to be ready. The genie's out of the bottle. You need to be using it now in some aspects and having the different levels of AI. Level 1 is just using AI, ChatGPT, having a dialogue, not a monologue, a two-way conversation. Level 2 is the customized programs. Level 3 is what you were talking about, creating custom AI agents and custom GPTs, which is an agent, right? So it's brand specific, and then giving your franchisees best practices so they know what to do so that they don't do anything outside brand compliance. And then level 4 is workflow automation. That's one area that I've been leaning into heavily, is how to get workflow. So for example, every month I do that live AI masterclass. They register on WordPress. It's a Gravity form. It adds them to Airtable. There's a survey they fill out on their level of understanding of AI. I get a report. So it's automatic. From there, it adds them to my CRM system and tags them. From there, it adds them to an autoresponder. So all that used to take a person's time to go in and do. And now with Zapier, N8N, and Make.com are the 3 tools that we're using. It's just crazy, but it's as smart as I am, the biggest thing I would tell people as we get ready to wrap up is the scariest people are the ones who think they know everything, but don't know what they don't know. And if you're listening to this episode today, obviously, or the Business Growth Show podcast, I'm very clear that I don't know. And so I'm open to learning, but I'm very opinionated at the same time. It sounds like that's what you are too. Any closing thoughts you have for our listeners today?
Yeah, stay curious. Be knowledgeable about what is going on around you. Spend time in building community. I don't come up with any good idea. I just take all the ideas and all the things that my team and what I see other people working on, and then I can identify how that can apply to our business and how we might be able to take advantage of that lesson or that experience or that tool that we learn about. So it's really about being curious, getting out there, staying connected, building community, and then sharing what you're doing. Give without expectation, and know that all of that's going to come back your way in spades, and people are going to want to help you and make sure you're informed, to make sure you're educated, and make sure you have those resources available to you as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Fordify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.